We open in a dark room, where a body lies in a pool of blood. The door slides open and booted feet rush into the room. A figure crouches beside the form of Kiana Arden and checks her vitals. She's alive, though unconscious. The figure removes a small syringe from a belt pouch and injects it into her neck. Arden coughs and her eyes blink rapidly, and she tries to sit up, but a hand holds her down to the floor. Commander Volkov shakes his head and says, "Don't try to move. The station is lacking a proper mender, but there's a medbay that should help you recover." At that, Arden rasps out a laugh. The Azure Court commander frowns and says, "Can you tell me who attacked you? Was it the Radiant Council?" Arden takes a few breaths before trying to form the words with her swollen lips. "Alexis, Wolfe, Mender. Don't let her escape." Her eyes flutter as the exertion threatens to send her back into oblivion. Commander Volkov turns away and speaks into his comm. "Lock down the station, and find out who Alexis Wolfe is. When you do, detain her." Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures, the solo actual play podcast where stories are told at the speed of dice. With me, Steve Morrison, your game master and solo player. Now come on, let's grab the dice and see where our story goes. Welcome back for episode 7 of season 3, Cry Havoc. Last time, Alexis Wolfe faced off against her old friend Vanguard, and they fought a brutal duel in this small apartment on Scirocco Station. During the fight, Wolfe loses her sword and can't seem to get hold of it again, but she mostly manages to fend off Vanguard's attacks. After some grappling, Vanguard stabs Wolfe with a knife and manages to get a shot off at Raven, who is tied up against a chair in the corner. Wolfe tackles Vanguard, beats her into unconsciousness, and then hurries over to Raven to find that her friend has been shot in the shoulder. Wolfe frees Raven, and they're about to leave when they hear Vanguard in distress. Wolfe stops, and she can't leave her old friend in this state, so she stops to help out and stabilize her before they leave for the ship. They make their way through the halls, and they avoid any interaction with Azure Court soldiers as they're making their way down to the docking bay. But when they reach the docking bay, with the help of a few stationers who are concerned about the Azure Court presence, they see the ship in the docking bay, but Valkyrie alerts them that the ship has been placed on lockdown, and Azure Court soldiers are on their way to this location. That is where we left off, and so we pick up with Wolfe leaning against Raven. The two of them are practically holding each other up at this point. Wolfe sees her ship, the Dead Reckoning, but based on what Valkyrie said, there is no way for them to get to the ship and escape. The ship itself has been locked down, and Valkyrie has not been able to override the lockdown. Valkyrie comes over the comm again and says, "Wolfe, Azure Court soldiers are growing closer and closer. You have to run. Go, hide. I will contact you when I am able to break the lockdown." Wolfe turns to Raven and says, "Are you ready to run a little bit?" Raven nods, though there's a pained expression on their face, and they turn away from the docking bay and start making their way back through the hallways into the deeper part of the station. There are Azure Court soldiers coming. So I think that is the first thing that we have to deal with. And I think this is going to be just a straight up face danger move as they are trying to get away from the oncoming soldiers. I think it's going to be plus edge. I think it is literally their ability to move through the hallways and to get away from being boxed in by the Azure Court soldiers. So we're going to roll plus edge, which is +2 for Wolfe. So here we go. 5 on the action score, a 5 and a 10 on the challenge dice for a miss. On a miss, you fail, or a momentary success is undermined by a dire turn of events. Pay the price. Okay, here's the thing. I think a failure here means that they can't escape the Azure Court soldiers, and they're going to come face to face with them. And in Wolfe's state, I don't know that she's going to be able to fight off a group of soldiers. So I have 7 momentum, and I'm going to burn it right now to turn this into a weak hit, at least. It's going to be rough, because we're going to make a suffer move, but I think we got to do it. So we're going to burn the momentum. We're going to go down to 1 momentum, unfortunately. And because it's just a weak hit, we're successful, but we have to make a suffer move at -1. I don't really want to move my momentum down from 1 to 0. And I don't want to move my health. I don't think that narratively makes sense here. So I feel like the only other thing that makes sense is supply. And unfortunately, I think that makes the most amount of sense here. So I'm going to move my supply down to 0. And I believe that means that I am now unprepared as well. So when you sacrifice resources and your supply falls to 0, you must mark unprepared. So things just get worse and worse as Wolfe is now without supplies. And I think what this represents is for the first couple of turns in the hallways leading away from the docking bay, Valkyrie is feeding them information on where the Azure Court soldiers are. And then there comes a point where Valkyrie says, "Wolfe, I believe I will no longer be able to communicate with you. There is an effort on the station's behalf trying to block out communications. Should we go?" And then the voice cuts off and the communicators are completely jammed. And Wolfe says, Val, Raven, it's just you and me. And they are going to keep moving. But unfortunately, they're now without supplies. Wolfe is shaken. Things are very dire for Alexis Wolfe. But she successfully navigates away from these Azure Court soldiers. And I think they emerge into the main concourse where this fountain is. And there's a gathering there of stationers. And so they sort of lose themselves into the crowd a little bit. And they really need to find a place to hide and recover. So here's the question. Wolfe doesn't really have any contacts on the station other than Raven, but Raven is from the station. They live here, and it stands to reason that they would have friends or possibly know someplace that the two of them could go to hide. So let's ask the Oracle. Does Raven know anyone who would help them hide from soldiers of the Azure Court? I think it's likely. So 75 or less. 89 is a no. Raven doesn't know anyone who would be willing to help them. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe it's not that they don't know anyone who would be willing to help so much as they don't want to put any of their friends in danger. And maybe even they recommend one of their friends, and Wolfe shakes her head and just says, no, we can't go to anyone that they would know that knows you, because those people are going to be the first person they go to. We have to find some place to hole up that no one is going to expect. Second question, does Raven know of a place where they could hide? They're a pilot on the station, so they would have access to probably the schematics of the station and maybe would know about some places. So I'm going to say this one's 50-50. 73, again, it's a no. The dice really, really want them to be captured, apparently. Raven's just like, I don't know anywhere we could go. It's not that big of a station, all things considered. So I think Wolfe is going to take matters into her own hands and is going to try to find a place for them to hole up. While they're in this central chamber of the station where the fountain is, and there's this low murmur of people talking, at this point, they've maybe grabbed some like coats and things that they could wrap around themselves to disguise the fact that they're covered in blood and injured. And so they're staying away from sort of the central area of this open atrium. But I think Wolfe plugs into the station computer and is going to attempt to gather some information here to see if she can find a place for them to hide. This is going to be plus wits, which is +2 for Wolfe. 5 for the action score, 1 and a 9 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. So the information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. Envision what you discover, then take +1 momentum. I'm going to roll on descriptor and focus and see if that gives us a sense of what information Wolfe is able to pull up, and then we'll decide how that complicates our quest. Everything complicates our quest at this point. So descriptor is trapped. That's the truth. 92. Literally trapped trap. So I think that what the dice are trying to tell me is that it's a trap. Maybe Wolfe gets a message from Dr. Winter. And it's a written out message. It's not a voice message, but it is written out, and Dr. Winter says, "I know you're in trouble. Come to the lab and I'll hide you." Wolfe knows that this is a trap, but I think she doesn't see that they have a choice. They have no supplies. They have no additional weapons. They're both injured. She thinks about it for a moment and then realizes that it's really the only option. She, I think, is hoping that, yes, it's a trap in that there are going to be Azure Court soldiers there waiting for them, but I think she's also hoping that they will not be as strongly focused on defending that particular area because it's such an obvious trap. And so Wolfe, I think, is hoping that she can deal with whatever soldiers are there and then get some genuine help from Dr. Winter. So she turns to Raven and she says, "Well, Raven, I don't really want to do this, but I think we're going to need to go to the Radiant Council. Do you trust me?" And Raven, whose shoulder is burned and throbbing, grits their teeth and just nods and says, "Yes, I trust you. We've got to do something." Wolfe agrees and says, yes, we do. All right, let's go. And they are going to make their way to the lifts and make their way down to level 6. I think that Wolfe has spent enough time coming and going from the Radiant Council labs that she knows what the other businesses are that are around the Brightman Initiative. So let's roll on the settlement project table, and that should give us an idea of, generally speaking, what the next door neighbor to the Brightman Initiative, what they do. 40. History. Okay. So it is some sort of historical research collective. And what they do is they collect data. I mean, this sector is controlled by a subsidiary of Hamshal, so it's probably some sort of vault-delving research company. Wolfe remembers seeing Ascendant Exploration for discovering the depths of every vault, and she thinks that those walls probably butt up against each other, and that is the place to go. At this point, it's probably a little bit in towards evening on the station because Wolfe came back sort of mid-afternoon. Remember, she's had a really long couple days because it was just this morning that she had to run back to the Dead Reckoning on the planet Iris, sleep for a couple hours, get up, do some research, go rescue the crystal from that winged forge spawn, and get back to the station. So I think it's probably safe to say that it's into the evening at this point. I'm not even going to roll on it because I think it just makes sense and I don't want the dice to screw me, which it seems to be the thing that they are intending to do right now. So I'm going to say that it is in towards the evening, and most likely that office is going to be closed, that there's not going to be anyone there currently. Wolfe and Raven make their way to the 6th floor and make their way to this door, which is down the hall from the Brightman Initiative. As they're creeping down the hall and like watching, there don't seem to be any Azure Court soldiers standing around outside in the hallway. So they are able to sneak up to the door. Wolfe breaks in and they slip through. But I feel like we have to roll on this. I don't have any doubt, given what Wolfe has shown, that she can break into this place. But I think the danger that we're facing that would trigger a roll here is whether or not it sets off an alarm in the station. And so I think she's going to roll face danger plus wits on this. This is +2. Come on, dice. 8 on the action score, a 1 and a 3 on the challenge dice for a strong hit. Our momentum moves up to 3, and they are inside of this office, this historical research office. Now, here's the thing. They're inside this office. Is this a place for them to stop and rest? Or should they keep moving and move into the next room? If I hadn't had that supply loss to get us to unprepared, I would say that they might actually hole up here overnight and try to hide and recover a little bit. But because we're at 0 supply, I don't think it narratively makes sense to say that Wolfe has medical supplies to treat their injuries. She used what she had on helping Kiana Arden not choke on her own vomit. So I don't think they have the resources to do anything here. So I think they have to try to get into the Radiant Council lab and see what happens. That being said, I don't think that Raven is going to come with Wolfe. I think Wolfe is going to get them into this room. She is confident that she did not set off any alarms. She's going to help Raven sort of hole up and rest. And then she's going to say, all right, I'm going to go over into the lab next door. If I'm not back in an hour or two, I'm probably not coming back. And I think she reaches out a hand and on Raven's non-injured shoulder kind of squeezes it and says, I'm sorry for bringing this all down on you. I probably have a lot to explain. And Raven shakes their head and says, you don't have anything to explain. I don't know what that Azure Court soldier's problems are, but you are a healer. You're a good person, Wolfe. You helped this station, and the people of this station won't forget it. Wolfe stands up. She makes sure that her sword and her laser pistol are in place. She goes over and climbs onto a desk and opens a panel in the ceiling and sets it down. And there is a maintenance shaft lattice work up above this room. And she pulls herself up. Ugh, it hurts, but she pulls herself up and into this small corridor of like a maintenance area that runs above the ceilings of this level. There's probably these maintenance passages through all of the levels on Scirocco Station, so workers can get through to various parts of the inner workings of the station. She looks kind of either way. There's nobody present in the maintenance shaft. She climbs into it and is going to make her way towards the Brightman Initiative. She slinks her way through these corridors, and I think she is going carefully, sort of counting off steps mentally, trying to picture where exactly this would lead. And I think we're going to do another face danger here. This time It's got to be with Shadow. Deception, stealth, or trickery, as she's trying to sneak through this crawl space. So we're going to roll plus Shadow, which is +1 for Wolfe. See what happens. 5 on the action score, a 7, and a 1 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. So we're successful, but not without cost. Make a suffer move at -1. Well, that's momentum. We're going to lose a momentum. Our momentum goes down to 2 as Wolfe slowly is creeping through this maintenance shaft. And she has to go very slowly so she doesn't make any noise. And she also is checking for lasers or any sort of security features within the maintenance shaft itself that might impede her or that might alert anyone to her presence there. It takes her like an hour to go just maybe 30 meters. But eventually she reaches a point where she is fairly confident that she is above Dr. Winter's office. She is going to then slowly detach the panel. And I think from this side, there are probably handles on the panel, and she can detach it, holding on to it, lower it a little bit, and then is listening into this room. Is there anybody in the room with Dr. Winter? I think it is unlikely. I think if there's an ambush waiting, they are waiting elsewhere. So I think it's unlikely. 25 or less will be a yes. 51 is a no. So there is no one waiting in the room with Dr. Winter, specifically for Wolfe. The other question is Dr. Winter still there? I think she is dedicated to her research, so it is almost certainly yes. So let's roll on it just to make sure. 62 is also a yes. Dr. Winter is sitting at her desk, working on her computer. Wolfe opens the hatch above, pulls up the panel into the maintenance shaft, and is looking down over Dr. Winter. Now, she knows that Dr. Winter's office is bugged, so she can't really call out, and she doesn't want to startle the doctor, but she needs to get her attention in some way. So Wolfe rummages around in her pockets and pulls out like a small sheaf of paper. And she scribbles a note on it real quickly, crumples it up, and then simply tosses it down in front of Dr. Winter. It falls through the air and clatters on the desk. Almost imperceptible noise. Just a small crumpled bit of paper hitting a desk. But it's enough to draw Dr. Winter's attention. First of all, she looks up and sees Wolfe in the ceiling. And her eyes widen, but to her credit, she does not call out. She does not start. And then she reaches down and she opens the piece of paper, and it says, "Are there Azure Court soldiers waiting for me?" And Dr. Winter looks back up and nods. Wolfe mouths, "How many?" Now here is a very important question. How many Azure Court soldiers are waiting? There are not that many on the station. So I think in order to effectively lock down and search the whole station, there probably can't be that many. So I think there are 2. I think there are 2 Azure Court soldiers here. I think it's almost certain that there are just 2. 3 is a yes. Dr. Winter holds up a hand and holds up 2 fingers. Wolfe nods and then mouths again, pointing to her eyes, like, can they see into the room? And Dr. Winter half shrugs, half shakes her head, as if to say, I'm not really sure. I don't think so. Wolfe nods, takes a breath, and then is going to attempt to pull herself down and into the room. And she does so with relative ease. I mean, she's hurt, but she has enough sort of strength in her to get down and to do so quietly. As she starts to pull herself out of the maintenance shaft, Dr. Winter turns some music on so that it creates some extra sound that will hopefully obscure any sounds that Wolfe might make as she emerges. She gets into the room and she walks over and she writes on a piece of paper and says, "Will you help me?" Dr. Winter nods and writes on it, "I'll do what I can." Wolfe says, "I need supplies. I need to get to my ship, and I need to break the lockdown." Dr. Winter shrugs and writes, "I don't know that I can help with any of those things other than maybe supplies." She looks at Wolfe and writes, "You look hurt." Wolfe nods and writes, "Hence the supplies." She then writes, "Can you draw the soldiers in here without alerting them that I'm here?" Dr. Winter writes and says, "The door is locked from my end. I can't just leave. But I can ask them to come in here. They may not listen to me." Wolfe nods and says, "Let's try it." At which point she draws her sword and rolls her shoulders. She feels the wincing pain in her side where the stab wound is, the adhesive bandage and the antiseptic that she injected into it are holding for the moment, but she definitely can feel that weight of exhaustion just pulling her down. She goes to stand beside the door and nods to Dr. Winter. The doctor says out loud, "I know you're listening, soldiers of the Azure Court, and I need to get out of this room, please. I've been cooped up here for too long, and I need to at least stretch my legs and take a walk or something. I don't think that Wolfe is coming here, and keeping me is not going to advance your efforts. Your superiors want me to do research and contrive whatever weapons they're asking about. Fine, I'll do it, but I will not be held prisoner in my own lab." Does her plea make any difference? I think it's unlikely. Let's ask the Oracle. 65 is a no. A small comm opens up on the desk, and the voice of an Azure Court soldier says, "Sorry, Doctor. Orders are orders. You're to stay there until the commander decides that you are able to roam free." Dr. Winter says, "Well, at least bring me for some food then. I've been in here for hours, and if you won't let me out, then at least bring me something that I can eat. I'm starving in here." There's some silence for a moment, and then that voice chimes through again and says, "All right, I'll bring you some food. Give me a few minutes." The comm turns off. Dr. Winter sort of half shrugs and looks at Wolfe, and Wolfe just nods, and then she turns her focus back to the door, sword at the ready. About 7 minutes pass, and then the door opens, and in walks a soldier of the Azure Court. He is wearing finely appointed armor. He has his own baton. It's not a full sword, but it's a baton strapped to his side, and then a laser pistol, and then a rifle slung over his back. And he is carrying a small tray of food. And as he steps into the room, Wolfe explodes into action. Now here's the thing. Wolfe doesn't want to kill anybody at this point, but she does want to stop this guy from being able to fight back. So she is going to lunge forward and try to clock him over the back of the head with the hilt of her sword to knock him unconscious. And this is going to be a face danger with iron. So +3 on this. Here we go. 5 for the action score, a 9 and a 10 on the challenge dice for a miss. On a miss, you fail, or a momentary success is undermined by a dire turn of events. Pay the price. I know exactly what the dire turn of events is. Wolfe does exactly what she plans to do. She steps forward, she swings her sword, hilt first, and clocks him over the head. He doesn't even see it coming. He just crumples to the floor, and there's a clatter as the tray hits the ground, and she knows that that is going to have alerted the other soldier of the Azure Court. So she wastes no time and steps outside into the hallway, intending to step to the side of the door through which the other Azure Court soldier will be coming. She steps out into the hallway and basically steps face to face with 4 other soldiers of the Azure Court, one of whom has a commander's insignia on his uniform, and there are 3 others flanking him. They all draw up their weapons as she steps into the space. They also heard the clatter. The commander looks somewhat surprised, but quickly recovers and says, "You must be Alexis Wolfe, then." "Hello, Wolfe. I'm Commander Volkov. Maybe we should talk." Wolfe looks at him, the 3 Azure Court soldiers, and then the door slides open and the other Azure Court soldier is standing there, somewhat confused, and Wolfe says, "Look, I have no quarrel with you. I just want to leave this station and continue on my way, helping people. But you and your men are standing in my way. And people who stand in my way don't stand for long." "That's what it seems, considering the state of Operative Arden. You did a real number on her. I imagine you think you can do the same to us. But you're outnumbered, and let me tell you, you do not look like you are ready to face another fight. Come quietly, or we will subdue you." Well, Wolfe is in it now, because there are 5 soldiers of the Azure Court practically surrounding her. I mean, she could turn and run, but that's going to be a whole other mess. On the other hand, these soldiers of the Azure Court, we don't really know a whole lot about them and about how skilled they are. I'm going to ask the Oracle that, because I think that's going to determine what Wolfe does next. Are these soldiers of the Azure Court highly trained? I think it's unlikely. I think they're pretty standard soldiers. 25 or less. 78 is a no. They are not highly trained, which means Wolfe smiles and says, "It may look that way, but trust me when I say this. You don't want to be on the other end of my sword. And you don't want to be on the other end of our wrath. Veiled Rest is a small sector compared to some of the others, and the phantoms of the Azure Court hold sway over it. You raised a hand against one of ours, and if you don't surrender now and come quietly, you're going to face our full wrath." Wolfe draws her sword up in a salute and says, "You haven't seen wrath until you've seen havoc." And she is going to try to overpower them. And we are going to use the battle move, because I don't think we need to do a full drawn-out combat. Because these guys are not specially trained, Wolfe is specially trained. And I think she can take these 5, even in her battered state. But we'll see what the dice decide. So we're going to roll plus iron, because we're fighting in close to overpower your foe. So this is +3. Here we go. 4 on the action score, 3 and an 8 on the challenge dice for a weak hit. On a weak hit, you achieve your objective, but not without cost. Pay the price. Here's for all the marbles. 7. You encounter signs of a looming threat. Okay, perfect. So, Wolfe is standing in the hallway of this Radiant Council lab. There is an Azure Court soldier to her left. There are 4 Azure Court soldiers in front of her, including Commander Volkov, and she has raised her blade in salute. The Azure Court soldiers all draw their batons out as they realize that she's not going to surrender, and then Wolfe attacks. She steps forward and punches out with her fist and knocks Volkov back a step as he's surprised by the speed with which she moves. He stumbles back into one of his other Azure Court soldiers as the other 2 charge forward at Wolfe. Wolfe parries one blow and slashes hard across the chest of one of the Azure Court soldiers, cutting across his armor like it's nothing. It doesn't draw blood, but it sends him to the ground. She then turns and parries another blow and chops hard, hitting the hand of the Azure Court soldier holding the baton. He releases it as a gout of blood squirts from his thumb and his hand as he screams. She kicks him in the stomach and knocks him back. Then as another one comes rushing in, it's this flurry of iron as she is parrying and blocking, and in a matter of seconds, all 5 of those Azure Court soldiers are laying on the ground, groaning, and I think Commander Volkov from his back looks up at her as she stands over him, and he says, "You are formidable. I can see now why Arden has the look of her that she does. Are you going to kill us?" Wolfe looks down at them and says, "I don't know how many times I need to say it, but I am a healer now. I'm a mender. I don't want to kill any of you, but you keep standing in my way. Now stay down." And she holds the blade to Volkov's throat. He raises his hands and says, "I admit I am beaten. I yield to you." As she's standing over him, holding the blade to his throat, his comm activates and a voice comes through and says, "Commander Volkov, come in, please." He looks up at Wolfe questioningly. She nods, although gesturing with the sword to indicate that he should be careful about what he says. He says, "Here." Then the voice comes back through and says, "Commander Volkov, the rest of the reinforcements have arrived. We are continuing to secure the station." He says, "Very good. See that it is done." And then the comm deactivates and he looks up at Wolfe and he says, "You may have bested me and my soldiers here and now, but another 50 Azure Court soldiers have just landed on Skoroko Station, and you won't be able to best them all. What do you want to do, Mender Wolfe? Continue to run for the rest of your life? Or surrender to me? You're a formidable warrior, and I will treat you with the honor you deserve." Wolfe looks at him and says, "As much as I'd like to believe, Commander, that you are a man of your word, there's just too much at stake for me to go quietly. So, sorry, no, I won't be coming with you." And she kicks him in the face. As he dips into unconsciousness, Wolfe turns to Dr. Winter and says, "Dr. Winter, I'll be taking those supplies now." Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please spread the word, and if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, I'm at Errant Solo Pod on Twitter and Instagram, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.